reminders before we get started. And I know most of you are probably aware of these reminders already, but just a reminder anyway. Aware of your mic, and if we can't hear you, I'm sure somebody will speak up and say, "Hey, can you turn up your mic?" or whatever. And if you can, please leave your video on. It's always good to see everybody, especially on this bright and cheerful, warm Saturday morning. The session is being recorded, so if you want to watch that later, that'll be provided for you. And feel free to take breaks as you need it, because like I said, it is Saturday morning, and we are probably all just getting started this morning. Just a few reminders too about how to navigate Teams. Most people out there in the educational world don't use Teams on a regular basis, but this is the platform we use at KDE. And so, if you're wondering about how many people are here, there's the people option. The little chat bubble there is at the top. That's how you chat. If you have a question or you want to comment on something, please feel free to do that. Reactions are there. Becca will be using the breakout rooms later on today in our session. There's a little 3 dots there, ellipses under more. Of course, there's the camera button that turns on your camera, turns off your camera. Also, there's the mic button and also share and leave. So if you've got any questions about that or need any help, please just let us know. Also, just some team norms. Please, participate respectfully. I know nobody's going to do that. We're all here to learn and to share from one another. We welcome multiple viewpoints. So if you have something that you agree or disagree with, or have something else you'd like to say, please feel free to do that. This is a welcoming space. Please devote your attention to those speaking and sharing. I know for me, it is hard sometimes to keep kind of in the groove and to focus on what's being said at sometimes, but it is important to do that. If you've got some questions that you want to ask just to be clear about something, feel free to do that. Be courageous and speak your truth. I think that is very important, that you stay true to who you are and what you think. Own your intentions and your impacts. So again, be courageous and speak your truth. I think those two go together. And then let's honor our time together. We're only here for a couple hours, and this is a special time for us to be together and to share and to learn from one another. There are several different ways we can stay connected through Kentucky Leads. We have the Kentucky Leads SharePoint site. We also have a directory that has all the different people that participate in this program, in this grant. And also there's a Kentucky Leads discussion board, which is really important as you comment on, the different things that are said in the sessions, what's said by speakers, that type of thing. That's an opportunity for you to share with us and also with others in the group. And in case you missed it, there was a special Kentucky Lead Summit in June, and that link to the session is coming soon. So if in case you couldn't go to the summit, you can watch that online. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to have our check-in, and then we've had our updates. We are really excited to have a special speaker today. We've got Andrea Bartholomew from the Office of Special Education and Early Learning. She is the branch manager there in Early Learning, and she is going to tell us about all things preschool. Then we'll have a break, and then we'll come back, and Andrea will share some more information about preschool with us today. Then we'll have an opportunity to group share, and then we'll have our evaluation and wrap up.
Great, thanks.
So I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and I'm going to stop sharing. No, I'm not. I'm going to keep on sharing. Sorry about that, Mike.
No, that's
so Mike Abel's going to speak to us today from HDI, or the Human Development Institute. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Kathy. You can flip over the next slide. So it's good to have everybody here this morning. Hope you're having a good summer and surviving the heat. It was like 100. I think the heat index here was 106 yesterday in central Kentucky. So it's definitely a scorcher. a couple quick little questions. Has anybody started school yet? If you have, could you raise your hand, either physically or put your little flag up? All right, no one started yet. Is anybody going to be starting the next 2 weeks? Getting back? Couple. Okay, very good. So as we're starting to wrap up the summer, this is going to be an important session as far as our early childhood work, but also important is the requirements that we have for our grant. And as I've mentioned before, one of the things that goes into our annual performance report are the discussion board comments. And so I want to ask you to continue to post things in the discussion board. We have some little snippets on the right side of the screen there of different things that are posted in there that could be helpful to you. But we want you to use that to your benefit, both to help you in going through the Leads Academy, but then also for your work in district or as you're preparing and seeking district leadership positions as well. So keep that in mind, and we ask you to continue to focus on and go ahead and submit comments in there during the month. You can hit the next slide, Kathy. So this is a snapshot of all those who attended. Got a lot of you in there. It was a great summit. We had a lot of good speakers, great participation, and great sharing and networking. And that's going to be of vital importance as you move into leadership roles and networking. Some of the people you're meeting here in the academy are going to be lifelong colleagues across the state. So we're glad that they were able to be a part of that. Just want to show you the picture here. Kathy, you can hit the next slide. So on the next month for our session, we'll be joined with cohort 4. We have 13 new scholars joining us along with your cohort. We're excited about them. So we wanted to make you aware of that they'll be joining next month. That's why we have a smaller group this month. You can flip to the next slide, Kathy. So if anyone has any questions, we take a little minute here to answer any of those that I can. I would ask you to make sure that you are registered for your fall classes, which will be starting soon. I'm happy to answer any questions I can about those, but I do not oversee those, the university programs. So your contacts for the DOE-CERT program would be the main person. But I will say if there are issues that come up and you're just needing some direction, you're not sure where to go, or you're not getting much traction there, you can reach out to Becca, myself, and then we'll jump on and help move things forward. Any questions that I can answer before we turn it over to Andrea? Kathy, I'll turn it back to you then.
Okay, Mike. Well, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over to Andrea.
Good morning, everyone. Let me try and get my PowerPoint going here. It says you are about to present. Yes, present, please. Okay.
Yeah, we
There
see
you
you here.
go. Looks
All right, we
good.
good? Good. All right. So I am really excited to be here with you all today. This is the second time, or it's third time really, I've talked to a group of scholars from the Kentucky Leads program. It's always really exciting for me to meet uh, folks that I will probably be working with in the future, as Mike said. As you guys move into different positions within your districts or others, as you learn all things about being a director of special education. Some of you might be wondering, why is preschool here? That has no business with my business. Well, it does. So we all know that IDEA is 3 through 21. So that 3 to 5, we call that the 619 program. That refers to the 619 section of the actual IDEA. So one of my other jobs at the Department of Education, besides being branch manager, is being the state's 619 coordinator. That means I get to go across the country to conferences and meet with different 619 coordinators of other states and kind of talk about all the great things that Kentucky has going on and to learn new things that I can bring back here and hopefully put into our preschool program. So we have the IDA portion, 3 to 3 to 5. You got to cover those kids, but also a lot of times as a dose, you will also be asked to be the preschool coordinator, especially if you are in a small district or an independent district. There may be a time where you wear both hats. And so you will need at least to have a background knowledge of some of this information that I'm going to share today. So as you grow into that and to that role, you can hopefully increase the preschool population within your district. So I can see the chat in this window, which makes me happy. I didn't know we could do this sharing this way on Teams. So thank you, Becca and Kathy, for showing that to me this morning. So if you have questions, pop them in the chat, or we have time for a break. I'm happy to talk. Our contact information is at the end of this PowerPoint. The reason that we all have jobs at the Department of Education is to help and support school districts, to help and support you all. So if you need support or help or encouragement or have questions, feel free to shoot us an email or give us a phone call. We're always here to help. I gotta have my coffee. So let's get started. Preschool 101. You're going way back in college. Like you're already back in college, but now we're going way back to when you were a freshman. 1,825. That's the number of days between a child's birth and them going to kindergarten, approximately. That's not that many days when you think about it that way. If you have kids of your own, you know how fast those days go by. Every year, like this summer feels literally like it started last week and it's already over. And so I know that with my own children, I feel this a lot, that these days go by uh, very, very quickly. Um, we know through research that the majority of brain development happens between 3 to 5 or birth to 5. We know that our kids are soaking up so much information in those preschool years, in those early childhood years, that we have to make sure as educators that we are filling their brains with the things they need to help them be successful in life. We talk a lot about graduation. We talk a lot about post-secondary. We talk a lot about high school. To get those kids where we want them to be in high school and post-secondary, we have to start in early childhood. You have to already have those foundations in place, knowing that, yes, this child is 3, but they're going to have a lifetime in this school system, and we're going to have to be able to pour into them to help get them to where they need to be as an adult. We want all of our kids to be ready for the future, and we start that in early childhood programming. So what we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk about what is preschool. Some of you may not know what the preschool program looks like in Kentucky. Others, this may be something you've heard for a long time. So we're talking about how we enroll, how we're funded, a little bit about our programming, what that looks like, some policies and procedures. This is not all of them. This is a very small snippet of our policies and procedures that we have in our preschool programs. That's a lot of P's. I'm alliterating a lot there. So we have a lot of those to follow because our preschool program falls under state regulation as well as federal regulation with IDEA. So there's a lot of things to follow. We also have some programs that are blended with Head Start. So that's a whole other set of guidelines. So when you think about your preschool programs and compliance, we have a lot of boxes to check for a lot of different people. And then we'll talk a little bit about Infinite Campus, how that applies to preschool programming. And then my favorite topic, being a data nerd myself, I enjoy assessment and data, talking about screenings. That Infinite Campus thing got there twice. Look at that. And then talking about the Office of Special Education Programming Indicator Review. I'm not sure what you've talked about so far in your lead sessions, but I'm sure that you have discussed these in your college courses or in your real life. The indicators that the Office of Special Education Programming uses to determine Kentucky's standing across the country as a special education program. And these are also used to determine local special education programming determinations, kind of how they're doing as a special education program. Preschool is responsible for 3 of the indicators, 6, 7, and 12. We will talk about those in length when we get there. and a little bit about our regional training centers, a place to get some support. So this is where the fun stuff happens. Early childhood is where it's at. We play all day, but we play with a purpose. We play with a reason. If you have never been in your district's preschool program, you should walk down there when school starts. Well, give them a couple days to stop crying and then come back. Not, well, both the teachers and the students to stop crying and then come back and see all the cool things that are happening. It will be chaotic. It will look like the world's on fire. But what's happening within that is such strong neuro connections. We know that if we play, that connection to that topic, to math, science, literacy, all the things, we know that that neuro connection in that brain is so much stronger through play. You can teach someone to do something through play much faster than you can just sitting them at a desk and having them write lines or do math problems at this age in early childhood. Those connections are made much stronger through play. But to get there, we have to start with what is Kentucky preschool? So, preschool is provided by each local school district. So we do have two local school districts, Wolfe County and Lee County, that provide preschool programming through their Head Start only. So we call those Head Start delegates. Those are the only two we have. Every other school district in the state offers some type of preschool programming. It's at no cost to families. This is all free for our families. For 3 and 4-year-old children, those children must meet a targeted enrollment criteria. That is kind of the catch with preschool in Kentucky. We do not have universal preschool. We do not have, although some districts do support more kids coming than are meeting the targeted enrollment. But as a state, we do not offer that. Our enrollment is based on being at risk based on income eligibility for our 4-year-olds. So these kids that are 4 by August 1st, which is the same day as kindergarten, that kindergarten cutoff, they have to be 4 by August 1st. And then families have to meet a threshold of 160% of the federal poverty limit. That number changes every year. The federal government puts out new poverty guidelines. Most of those are used for things like TANF and WIC and food stamps and all of that stuff. We kind of go through that same free lunch eligibility for at-risk income. And then 3 and 4-year-old students may qualify based on developmental delay or disability. So that's how our 3-year-olds come in. A 3-year-old cannot be at risk based on income eligibility. A 3-year-old must have a diagnosed disability, developmental delay, having been through the ARC process for the 3-year-olds. Typically in Kentucky, our enrollment, we like to see it 50-50, 50% disability, 50% at risk for income eligibility. Right now, we're a little bit special ed heavy. We're about 54% special ed. We have seen a lot of students qualifying for special education, especially after COVID. I mean, if you think about the ages of these children were literally born during the pandemic. They came into the world in 2020. A lot of them that are turning 3 and 4 coming up. So they've not had a lot of anything as far as outside contact with other people, social skills. A lot of times even their more developmental skills, even feeding themselves, toileting, taking care of their body, those types of things are delayed because they've not had the experiences that other kids have had their ages. So keeping that in mind, when you think about what you do in your daily life, if you work with older kids, the changes you saw post-COVID, take that down to a 3-year-old who's literally never lived in a world without the words pandemic and the words COVID. That can kind of really narrow it down for you on the kids that come to our preschool programs. So again, earlier I said that districts can choose to have a universal preschool program. They can. If a district can use their general funds, there's some Title I funds available. Sometimes they can charge tuition depending on the size of the program. The only thing that has to happen is the eligible students come first. So if a district decides they want to have all the 4-year-olds come in, in their district to prepare them for kindergarten, that's great. But all the eligible children have to be served first. If it comes down to a place where you don't have any more room and an eligible child shows up, you have to make room for that child to come receive services in an appropriate way. We will talk a little bit more about classroom size and ratio in a little bit, but that's something to keep in mind. Everyone wants universal preschool. I think everyone wants all the kiddos to get what they need and all the kiddos to get ready for kindergarten, but sometimes there's just not enough space for kids that are not technically eligible. So we do know that we have lots of strong partnerships with childcare programs in our areas. We have lots of strong partnerships with Head Start. So there are other places that kids can go if they do not qualify for the state-funded preschool program. Keeping those in mind, knowing those. Again, you may be asked to be a preschool coordinator as well as the director of special education. So those are kind of things in your community that you want to keep a pulse on. You know, what childcare will be good for this? What Head Start program do we have? So we receive state funding for all eligible students. So eligibility being special education eligibility or at risk based on income eligibility. That's where the state funding, those kids get funded through the state. This is not SEEK funding. Okay, this has no connection to SEEK, no connection to that average daily attendance that happens in school districts at K-12. This is a separate funding formula that is set aside in the state budget for state-funded preschool programming. Upcoming is an election. There'll be a new budget, a budget year. So hopefully we'll see either the same amount of money, we get about 84 million from the state to provide this programming, or an increase in funding would be great across the board. We know that in education. It would be nice to all of us to get a little bit more money, but that's coming up. So we will have to keep a close eye on that, on what happens in November, as well as when the session meets starting in January when the legislators come back. So making sure you realize and remember and understand that this is not SEEK funding is really important, because you may have other district folks in your world that don't understand that may think that these kids are connected there. And so you'll have to advocate. Say, no, that's not how this works. There is a formula. It's a standard rate per child. There are different categories for funding. You have an at-risk, which is at risk for income eligibility. You have a speech and language category and a developmental delay category, which encompasses 3 or 4 or 5 different eligibility criteria for special education. There is a weighted category for severe disabilities. That severe disability category includes things like autism, deaf-blind, visual impairment, hearing impairment, those categories. I think maybe even traumatic brain injury may fall in that one as well. There is a list that we have of those. I'm happy to have Becca post that in your guys' resource site, SharePoint site, so you can have it. It's not like a official list. It's a Word document that I created myself, so I could know what goes where. But when you say developmental delay, or you say the category is called, and Infant Campus is actually called MMD, that's how long this has been happening. We want to make sure that you understand that there's different criteria, or different areas fall into that. It's not just a child with developmental delay. It can be other categories as well. For speech, obviously that's speech and language impairment, articulation for those. So this is a scenario. These are not real per child rates. These are not real kids. Nothing about this is real, this slide. These are it's just a mock-up that we made, or that Bill Buchanan made many, many years ago, to help us all understand kind of how this works. So we take enrollment count on December 1, just like special education child count. And then we take another enrollment count on March 1. We take the average of those two, and that gives you your number of students where your per child is based off of. So you can see here at this magical unicorn school, we've got 68 kids for at-risk for income eligibility. In December, they had 64 in March, so their average is 65. At that point, our finance department here at KDE, the Office of Financial Operations, I believe is OFO, They will take the allotment, the full allotment from the legislative body, and they will cut it down so everyone gets a piece for the per child rate, and see um, what that number becomes, and then that's how that's how you're funded. Preschool funding is different as well because it is the numbers you collect this year fund your program for next year. So you're looking a year ahead. And so that's something that's really important to remember when you're budgeting or talking with your budget officers or your finance officers, knowing that it's not money you're going to get this school year, it's money for next school year. That can be a little bit tough sometimes, especially if you experience, like we did during COVID, we experienced a huge decrease in enrollment. Parents just weren't sending their little ones. Fully understand. So we had a real drop in enrollment, and districts felt that the next year. So they had all these kids they're planning for this year, and they don't have that many, but they know next year the enrollment's going to increase, but the funding is still based on the number of less kids. So that can be tough at times to adjust and to figure out. But that's why you have great finance officers to work with and great support in your district that you'll have to help you spend your preschool funds to the best of your ability. Questions about state funded, where the state funds are? So the other pot of money comes from IDA. It's federal funding. So that used to be long time ago, depending on how long you've been in a school district or how long you've been in education in Kentucky, you may remember a time when the preschool child count counted every single kid for IDA and got money similar to the way we do for preschool enrollment count. That doesn't happen anymore. It's a formula based. It's based on your free lunch population. There's a whole big thing with that on how you receive funding through IDA. You will receive a 619 pot of money from IDA that goes along with your K-12 child count. I don't think those change much. I think they're very stable as far as what your district gets every year. That might be something if you're already in a position or moving into one, you probably want to look and see what you get from your finance officer. And that is funding that comes from the federal government. Goes along with your K-12 child count funding. Because we know that IDA requires all of our districts to identify, locate, and evaluate through Child Find. We all know Child Find. It's our favorite topic. Got to find those kiddos, right? Ages 3 through 21. And specifically to transition children, infants, and toddlers, students receiving Part C to the Part B program. We will talk about that at length when we talk about Indicator 12. So we'll get there here in a few minutes. But that's just a reminder that IDA is 3 to 21. And those child find activities go right down to early childhood. A lot of our child find activities in preschool honestly can be a lot easier to do than K-12 because you have families that are just now getting started with preschool. They want to bring their kids, get them screened, and voila, you've done child find. You found a couple kids that may need an IEP and you're ready to go. That can be a little bit more difficult in K-12 with RTI processes and all of that. So any questions about that? So go on to program information. So I told the group when I talk about this piece, I get a little bit on my soapbox. I'm going to try not to. It's Saturday morning. No one wants to hear someone preach at them, right? But teacher certification. I mean, I became a teacher for fame and money. I don't know why you all didn't. That's exactly what we all need is that the extra paycheck for being a teacher, for sure. But I did become a teacher. So my background is in early childhood. I have an IECE certification. That's Interdisciplinary Early Childhood Education Certificate. I am dually certified as a regular education teacher and a special education teacher. So an IEC teacher can serve both of those roles in a child's life from birth to age 5. so through kindergarten. That is something that I don't think it's a secret that preschool teachers are certified. I think sometimes people don't think about it because a lot of times, if you don't, even if you're not, even if you're in the field, you may equate preschool education with childcare. You may equate early childhood with babysitting. And I know that's something that we fight against in our positions a lot, to be seen as a regular education teacher. And I am, and the IEC teachers are. Um, we fall under the same rules as all teachers. You have to hold a certification. You're employed by the district on that pay scale. So if you're a 10-year teacher that teaches fifth grade and you're a 10-year teacher that teaches preschool, you'll make the same amount of money. You're in retirement. We're provided the KTRS system, and we are fully vetted members of the school district. There are ways, and there are ways that you as a leader can help your preschool staff feel more included. I typically share a story that my first year teaching, like the ink was not dry on my teaching certification when I went into a classroom, and it was out in a trailer, a little mobile unit outside the school, which was fine. Um, it was fine until it started raining and the roof leaked, and there was a skunk that lived under the trailer who sprayed an opossum. Who it was the maintenance men liked to show our kids, which the kids thought was fun, but it freaked me out a little bit. But we're out there in these mobile units, and someone in the school, a first grade teacher in the school, had experienced a loss in her family, and so that one day for the staff meeting, everyone wore purple, and no one told the preschool people in the trailer to wear purple, so we didn't. And so we attend this staff meeting like we do every week, and completely stood out. Felt really bad because there was me and another teacher. We liked this person that had suffered the loss, and we felt very bad about ourselves, about our position. It made us feel completely excluded, and that really, that feeling didn't really go away for me for quite some time in my school district. So, as a leader in your school district, making sure that if you have preschool, even if it's not your job, even if you are the director of special education and you have a preschool coordinator, you know, to try to help and make sure that your preschool coordinator is doing what they need to be doing to help those preschool teachers feel included, to help school districts and school principals understand how important early childhood education is. And if they have a preschool room in their building, they need to know that teacher, that principal does. That principal needs to know the staff. That principal needs to know those kids because those kids are going to be his kids in a year or two when they come to kindergarten there, or her kids. You would be surprised the number of principals that know they have a preschool classroom. They don't know where it's at. They don't know who the teacher is because it's not their responsibility. And that is my soapbox, and I will step off of it. Very sorry about that. I am a fierce advocate for early childhood education. I'm a fierce advocate for certified teachers in early childhood. We know the difference that it makes. I see that someone has posted in the chat about Head Start teachers not typically certified. You're correct. Head Start has different rules. They have what they call a catchment area. So they can have several different districts within their offices. And within that catchment area, 50% have to be certified. So depending on how many districts you have, the district where you're located, your Head Start may not have certified teachers. I was a Head Start teacher. I was a Head Start teacher. I was a Head Start assistant. I love the Head Start program, but there is a difference in certification, which includes a difference in education for our students. And I think that is something to remember when you are in a leadership position in your district. Not that those Head Start teachers that you have need to be excluded, but understanding and advocating for them as well, but also understanding that there will be a difference in the education that your students receive. All right, soapbox down. That wasn't too bad. I only went on for about 5 minutes. I'm going to go for like an hour on that. So, talking about certification, there are several ways to be a certified teacher in preschool. And those I think are getting more every day with all of these new and creative certification routes that we're getting because of the shortages. No one wants to be a teacher anymore. let alone a preschool teacher who has to deal with 3 and 4-year-olds, especially some with emotional behavior issues, severe social issues that we're getting. But we do have the IEC certification that came about in 2004, 2005. That was a requirement. We are a state that does this dual certification. And I think I'm going to go back super quick. Sorry. Yeah, I think I skipped over this piece here. That, my goodness, this one. The IEC teachers may sign for both regular and special education teachers in the ARC. So that's something they can do. Typically, you write that in the conference summary notes that the teacher is IAC certified, and they may sign for both. So when someone pulls your record, they see that, they understand. Oh, they're both, because I am, and I keep saying because I am an IAC teacher. I taught in preschool for over 10 years, so this is personal as well as professional for me. But I signed for both roles because I was both roles. I provided the special education services, the progress monitoring, all of the things, and then I also provided the regular ed services on top of that. Yes, Kim.
Hi, Andrea.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Just want a quick question. You said conference summary, put that in there. Typically, we just put in under their name, IECE teacher.
Yeah, and any way that you want to do it is fine.
But they are both regular and special ed. Will that suffice, or do we?
That should suffice. Yeah, I mean, I am one who is cover yourself all the time. The more data, the more information, the better.
Yeah.
But if that's what your district has decided works, then that works for you for sure.
Okay. I think I just heard that a long time ago. As long as you put that in where they sign.
We would do the same thing. Yeah, we would put
instead of regular ed and special ed, it would say IECE preschool teacher. Okay.
Yeah. It goes back to what was it called? SETS. Does anybody remember SETS before Infinite Campus? Am I that old? I'm that old. Wow. SETS was the computer system we used before Infinite Campus for IEPs. Kathy remembers SETS, but you had to type in all that stuff too, so that became interesting. Thank you, Kim, for that comment. So we have the IEC degree. That's a professional degree. You go. Typically, teachers will come out of college with a special education degree with emphasis in early childhood. Others, like myself, my first degree is in deaf and hard of hearing education, and then I went back and got my IEC certification. And then I know that the rule that you have to get your master's degree, I don't believe it no longer applies, but most of our IECE teachers also have a special education master's with emphasis in early childhood. The place where I taught for my last teaching we had probably 15, 20 teachers in preschool, and all of us had our master's degree. We were a highly certified staff that was still seen to be a notch lower than everybody else. So you can see why I have a chip on my shoulder, right? So another ways that you can get certified is probationary. So that would be the same as others in education. You're getting that degree. Sometimes these are called the MAT program, I think. That's one way to get some teachers in. And then we're going to go through some letters here. So preschool in Kentucky has been around for a very long time. Our regulation was written in 1990, which is a long time ago. So there was a time where the preschool program was building itself, kind of, right? And then it got into the 2000s and realized, yeah, certified teachers, way to go. So we have that program. So we have teachers that were teaching before that came in with these letters of exemption. They may have had a teaching degree that was a P5 certification for primary through fifth, or kindergarten through sixth grade, different types of certification, but we allowed them to continue in their positions. Most of those folks are retired now. We every now and then you'll see a random one come across that has a SPED letter or a child development letter, which are the same. One's a certified position, one's a classified position, but it's kind of the same situation. They were teaching before, and they had these credentials that allow them to continue. Randomly, you'll find one, but we're getting quite far away from that now. This is preschool associate teachers. These are ones that had a child development associate's degree. They were in a classified position. I taught with one until I left my district in 2017, and she retired in 21. So she had been doing this for a very long time, but she was still considered a preschool associate teacher. The rule with these folks is that they have that CDA, they're a classified position. They may not transfer to another district. So the lady that I taught with had been in my district for 20 years. I'm doing this work, 20 years plus. But she could not have left to go to another district and gotten hired under this. I mean, you have to stay where you're at. If they wanted to move, they could have, they would have to get certified. These teachers don't serve as the teacher of record, so they're not the case manager for the children in their classroom, but they can implement the IEP under the guidance of a special education teacher or an IEC teacher, having curriculum oversight for the regular ed position. That was kind of the caveat there, that they can't necessarily sign off on the documents, but they can implement the IEP. So for this particular teacher that we had, one of us IEC folks would meet with her weekly, talk with her. She was a great teacher. She'd been doing this for a very long time. Like I said, she was a great teacher, but she needed support, especially with special education, because that was not her wheelhouse. So we would meet with her weekly, give her some ideas, come in and monitor a little bit to make sure that she had a grasp on the concepts. And then during her ARC meetings, one of us would sit with her and help her explain things to parents, that kind of thing, and sign off on the documents. Okay, questions about that? I do appreciate your comment, Amanda Bruce, about it being important to have teachers that are certified. Thank you. All right, so the next couple of slides are about how we monitor our preschool program. So just because we're little doesn't mean that we're exempt from monitoring and compliance, just like everybody else. And there's always an accountability system, a new one coming around the corner all the time, it feels like. And one of the ways that we do is we have information that's entered into the GMAP application system. GMAP is a system you will learn as a dose if you don't already know it. You will learn it for special education funding purposes. They will put you put your budget in there, you do some assurances there. If that's, you'll have some preschool assurances for the special education side there. The preschool GMAP app is different. R is a monitoring tool that we use strictly to look at like the makeup of the program, how many days they go, how many kids they're serving. It's a lot to monitor 170 preschool programs. It's a lot to monitor 170 some K-12 programs. So this is a way that we do it easily. Everyone puts their information, we can run the reports and see things. The goal is to improve outcomes for our kids. Always, that's always our goal, to help that they align their money to what it needs to go to. You'll see some fun things in those budgets, making sure you're not paying, your athletic director out of your preschool funds. That's probably a good idea to not do that, because they don't really have anything to do with preschool. Unless they're a preschool teacher, then that would be awesome. Have your athletic director be a preschool teacher. I think that'd be kind of fun. But making sure that you're spending your money appropriately, as well as providing appropriate services. One other thing we do is district determinations. So like I said earlier, with OSEP and the indicators, Kentucky receives a determination from the Office of Special Education Programming. In turn, local special education programs receive a determination from the state. Well, local preschool programs receive a determination from the state as well. We use all kinds of information. We use GMAP. It's our first step. We use a risk assessment, kind of go through things that we've heard. We had a lot of parent calls. We've had a lot of district complaints. Any special education complaints goes in there usually. We kind of go through that information and make sure that each program is doing what they need to be doing to help kids raise outcomes. And if a district is in violation of a regulation or in violation of part of our program, then we have a technical assistance process that follows. But that district would receive a did not meets requirements. If a district's doing everything okay, they get a meets requirements as their determination. Preschool's determination is a little bit different from the special education one that you would receive as a dose, because ours is tied to funding. So if the district is a meets requirement. They receive their first quarter payment in July. Preschool money is paid out in quarters. So the first quarter payment goes out in July. If for some reason something is wrong, something is big wrong, there is a possibility that the state can choose to withhold funding from the preschool program. That's a huge, long conversation that has not happened, knock wood, since we've been doing this, because no one needs to take the little amount of money that we receive away. But we want to make sure that our programs are doing what they need to be doing. It's something that we can, say, hey, if you continuously put 30 kids in your preschool classroom, we're going to not pay you money anymore, because that's against a rule. So those are things that you may not have known that we do monitor and enforce in the preschool program. Consolidated monitoring, preschool is a part of that. I'm sure some of you have had this process in your districts before. If you've not had the pleasure, you will at some point, someday, have consolidated monitoring come through your school district. This is a thing that happens in the spring, and it's all kinds of programs from the Department of Education. It's career technical education, gifted and talented, the title programs, all of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's bunches of them that come out, and then preschool goes as well to monitor the programs in a set number of districts that have been chosen through a risk assessment, similar to what we do with our determination. So that is a fun time in the spring to get out and go visit and go see kids and go see great programs. A lot of times the programs that we get to go see are for preschool are really doing really well. That's always fun. That is another way that we do monitor the early childhood programs in Kentucky. And again, if you've not had the pleasure of that yet, you will someday soon. All right. So questions about how we some of the ways that we monitor? All right. Policy and procedure. Again, these are just a couple highlights of our policies and procedures that we have in preschool linked here. And I believe Becca is going to put them in the SharePoint site that you'll have access to for your resources. That's our preschool regulation and our preschool statute. Noting that neither one of these, no, the statute was updated with the age change, I think, but the regulation has not been changed since 1990 when it was written. It was a long time ago, and we know that there are some things in there that need updating, need refreshing, but that is a whole process that we have to work through at the state level. It's not nearly as easy as I once thought it was as a teacher. So that's something to keep in mind. If you look at those and read through those and go, no one calls it a ditto anymore. It's not a ditto. What's a ditto? I hear the of the machine in my head, right? And so it's those types of words are in there, and we know that there needs some updatings to happen. But that is our basic. That's our law. That is where we stand upon for compliance with preschool programs. I'm not sure if you guys have had the pleasure of meeting Greta Hilton yet, the Associate Commissioner of OSIL. One of her lines is compliance is the floor. That's where we start. You have to be compliant. And truth be told, we have some preschool programs that are a little bit in the basement. We're trying to get them up to the floor to where they need to be. There's some K-12 programs out there that are a little bit in the basement, right? That need to get up to the first floor. So we are constantly working on that. But this is where our preschool compliance comes from, is our regulation. So we'll talk a few things that are in that regulation, but the whole thing is there. If you go through the regulation, section 6 is the biggest section, and that's where the details of the program are. What has to happen every day, what needs to occur, that type of thing. So this is probably one of the bigger things that you'll deal with as a leader in your district, either as a preschool coordinator or as a director of special education, because you'll have to have some input here, especially if you're a small district, having 20 kids top. That's our max number of kids in a preschool classroom. You may not have 21. You may not have 22 and hope that 2 don't show up that day. You may have 20. That's it. So the ratio for preschool is 1 to 10, and that is strictly enforced. Because you think about it, you're not going to leave a 3-year-old by themselves, right? What happens when 3-year-olds are left by themselves? mass chaos. Things happen. So we don't want that to occur. So 1 to 10 is our ratio. That includes every moment of that child's day. So pick up, drop off, lunch, outside, gross motor time, all of the things. Bathroom time. If you don't have a bathroom in your classroom, you have to make sure that you can't leave someone with more than 10 kids. You can't leave an adult with more than 10 kids. That is a huge safety thing. Like I just said, 3-year-olds are crazy, right? They go wild and they climb things. 4-year-olds do the same. So we want to make sure these kids are safe. Make sure these kids are in a situation that they're not going to get hurt physically, mentally, or emotionally. And this ratio is one way that we do that. That's hard sometimes, especially when you are experiencing staff shortages. It's even harder when you have 20 students in your classroom and you have 20 IEPs in your classroom. As a special education teacher, think of myself as that. Oftentimes in my preschool classroom, I had more than almost 20 IEPs. I would have probably 15 of my own, 16 of my own in my classroom, and then I would be a monitor for some others. So when you are considering your classes, when you're considering enrollment, when you're considering placement, especially ARC placement for least restrictive environment, you have to consider the group size, especially with kids with severe disabilities. We have found that autism diagnosis is rising incredibly fast, especially think about again the ages of the kids in preschool. They're 3 and 4, which is a lot of time when that first diagnosis comes, is around 3, right? So we're seeing that number jump, and that's hard to have 20 students in a classroom, have 5 or 6 of them diagnosed with autism, and having 2 adults. That can be tough, especially if the students have, emotional issues, or have violent tendencies. It's hard to think sometimes about 3 and 4-year-olds having violent tendencies. I have scars and a broken nose to prove that they do. I didn't dodge a block fast enough and a kid threw it at my head. I went the wrong way. But that's something that if you're not in the world of early childhood, you may not think happens. Diapering is a huge thing, Kim. You're right. That our kids don't come to us toilet trained. They don't have to be toilet trained. We have some kids that come in that are not toilet trained based on disability. They're a delay in their adaptive skills, and we work with them to get there. We have others that come in because the parents, frankly, haven't taught them because school will teach them when they get there when they're 3. That's fine. Or the kid comes in and maybe has been trained and gets to school and has, new experiences and new things happening and loses some of that. But that's something that you have to think about when you're placing kids in classrooms, when you're placing adults in classrooms. I taught for over 10 years. I rarely had a second assistant. Some people think that we don't even need one, although we do for ratio. This is where we hang our hat. If you can imagine dealing with 23 and 4-year-olds and half of them have autism by yourself and you think that's okay, maybe me and you should have a cup of coffee and have a conversation about that, because that is something that we're really struggling with in our groups right now. We have kiddos that are coming in, like I said earlier, that have never experienced the world pre-pandemic. They don't know what that world is. And they're coming to us with more emotional trauma, not just the collective trauma that we all live through, but trauma in their homes, trauma in their lives that is impacting their emotional regulation skills. And we're not always prepared for that from a 3 and 4-year-old, like I said earlier. So having that maximum of 20, ratio 1 to 10, but notice in our regulation it says consideration shall be given to increasing the number of staff or decreasing the group size depending on the needs of the children, including the needs of children with disabilities. So that's just something to keep in mind. Another soapbox of mine. I think Kim would get on it with me. So the next thing that we've got here is enrollment. Earlier, we talked about the count. We said there's the December count and the March count. The reason we have a March count is because we must maintain active enrollment of children. So K through 12, you start school in August, you end school in May. The only time you move in and out of your school is if your the child and family physically move, right? Or if they've been placed in an alternative location. For preschool, we have kids that come in all year, right? The first bulk of kids that come in throughout the school year are kids that transition from First Steps, or it's now called the Kentucky Early Intervention System, KEIS. They're calling it KEYS. So the KEYS program is the Part C program. Those kids transition on their third birthday. So if they turn 3 March 5th, they come to school March 5th. Their IEP is implemented March 5th if they're eligible. So we have kids that come in that way, but also we're required to serve eligible students. So if a family moves into town in January and has a preschool kid that's eligible, they need a spot. And that can be tough to discuss with superintendents sometimes, some leadership because they have that K-12 mindset is our classroom is full on August 15th or whenever school starts. We need to make sure that we're saving room, or you're gonna wind up in a pickle when you have nowhere to put eligible students that you are required to serve. This would also be 3-year-olds that qualify for disability. So if a 3-year-old moves into the district and they've just got a brand new diagnosis of autism, or parents have concerns about their delay, we have to put that child in the process and have space for them if they qualify and are eligible. I mean, I do think that that's something that can be a little bit of a change of thinking. Kim's commented, if you haven't figured it out yet, Kim is one of me. She's a preschool person. She's so in her district. So I'm glad that you're here today, talking about there cannot be a waiting list for students. And that's true. Head Start is allowed to have a waiting list. State funded preschool is not. The only waiting that can be done would be to see if they're eligible for services when you go through the referral process with them. But you're not allowed to put those students on a wait list. Mike Abel, I see that your hand is up.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, I was just going to follow up with some things you're saying, which is so true. I took the position as a director, and then I was also responsible for our preschool program and did not have a high level of preschool experience. The preschool program was a constant issue that I had to keep a handle on. And so I had regular weekly meetings. I had 2 teachers, each had an aide, and then I had one special education preschool teacher certified that floated between the two classrooms. And my main point here is, one, it is very important to give them, the preschool program, the attention they need, because it can get very involved very quickly and very volatile, especially with the influx of really involved high needs children, behavior disorder kiddos, autism, kids with autism, and a variety of other traumatic experiences. And so if you don't have resources prepared to support those teachers, things could get sideways really quickly. And we had OT and PT staff that were there. We're doing consults with us. I had a behavior specialist that would come in and do consults with us. We had multiple behavior plans going on. So my point is, it's not something that you can just think you'll touch base with every once in a while. It's a very involved program with very involved children and that staff that do need that support. So I just wanted to echo that. And the class size issue is something I always was really paying attention to, because as Andrea said, if you go over your class size, you're dealing with waiver issues and all kinds of things. So the numbers of kids, class sizes were important, as well as staffing. So thanks, Andy.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike, for that. Thank you for your testimony on my soapbox about preschool today. It's definitely something to keep in mind. Yes, we have a couple more slides. You want to go ahead and take a break, Becca? or Kathy? Do you want to
Um,
take it? Or do you want to get through these next 3 slides and then we take a break?
let's get through the next 3 slides and then take a break.
Okay. I'm almost there. This is where we said. I talk a
Yeah.
lot. I talk a lot. So I could talk about preschool for days and days and days and days. And so they had to like prescribe me out here so I would be able to get through all the content. Just real quick, talking about Head Start. We talked a little bit about Head Start earlier. We have a duty to, and a regulation behind it from the federal government to work with our Head Start programs. There is in the Head Start performance standards, talks about transition between programs. It talks about enrollment of programs, having a smooth relationship with your Head Start partners. Sometimes that looks like they're over there and you're over here and you just talk and maybe send kids. Sometimes it looks like a blended program, which means the program that you're in receives Head Start money and state money, and you serve the kids all kind of together mixed up, and your teachers are kind of all together mixed up. Or it can look like it does in Wolf and Lee counties, where Head Start does everything. There is no state-funded program there. But the biggest things to remember is that when you have a full utilization agreement, it might be something that you'll have to sign as a director of special education, as far as if you're the preschool coordinator, or you may have to look at it because it does outline the services for Head Start students who have a disability. Those districts have to enter agreements with each other based on the number of kids that they'll serve, and based on those provisions for students with disabilities. Every year, the Head Start full utilization agreement is determined, so that Head Start program and the school district can decide that the Head Start is going to pay for the buses, or that the school district is going to pay for an IEC teacher to be in the Head Start building to have, so those students with disabilities can be served. This is when they can decide, which itinerant teacher is going to go to the Head Start building to provide speech services, all of that, how that's going to work. They must sign those and submit those to us. Again, IDAs 3 through 21, which includes Head Start students. The district may contract with the Head Start to provide IDEA services, or they can be provided at the local school district. The one thing you cannot do is say all the students with disabilities are attending my local school district program. No students with disabilities will be attending the Head Start program. One, because that's predetermination, and we don't do that. And we want to make sure that kids are going where they need to go and where their families feel that they can learn best, which may be a Head Start program. But also because Head Start cannot allow that to happen. Head Start must have a 10% population of students with disabilities. That's one of their performance standards, one of their requirements. They must serve 10% students with disability, or up to, I guess, or starting at 10%. They can always do more, but they have to meet that 10% minimum of students with disabilities to be served in the Head Start program. But no matter where children with disabilities are served, the local school district, the director of special education, you all, would be responsible for that student, providing services for them, making sure their needs are being met, making sure families' needs are being met. In programs where there's great relationships between Head Start and the local school district, that's not a problem. That's fine. It works out the way it should for everyone. In situations where the Head Start program and the local school district may not have a solid relationship, may not have communication with each other as often as they should, that can become a problem. And then we look at things like, FAPE not being a free and appropriate public education not being provided. We look at issues with compliance. We look at issues with service times not being met. We look at predetermination, those types of things. So wanting to make sure, as a director of special education, if you were not assigned the preschool program as one of your duties, making sure you know what's going on with those Head Start kids. We've had some times where the Head Start program has had to shut down for a time. Some of the flooding issues we had in Eastern Kentucky literally wiped away some Head Start buildings. Some of the tornadoes, the same in Western Kentucky, or simple as a water main break, but they can't be fixed because it involves extensive drilling, or excavation or whatnot. But those kids are not receiving their IDEA mandated services at that point. So that's when, as a director of special education, you would need to step in and say, hey, we got to figure this out to get these kids where they need to go to get these services. But those are situations we hope don't happen very often because those are kind of catastrophic. But that Head Start partnership is super, super important to the preschool environment and world. So I will leave this slide because we're going to talk about play next. It's so stunningly essential. Like love and sunshine and broccoli all juiced together. It's true. So Becca or Kathy, how long is our break?
So our
It's-
break is for 5 minutes, and I've got 11:06 on the clock, so I guess we'll come back at what, 11? Well, welcome back, everybody. It is 11:15, and we are looking forward to some more information from you, Andrea. That has just really been a good update for me. I stepped over in preschool for about a year or so. I really enjoyed it. I was also a preschool teacher for several years in the private school setting. So back to you, Andrea.
Thanks, Kathy. So play. We're going to talk a little bit about play. We hit on it earlier. How is if you've not spent time in your district's preschool program, you really should go down there and hang out for a minute and see what's going on. This is something that, again, as preschool teachers, we advocate very hard for. I would advocate for play-based learning all the way up to 3rd grade, but that's just me. Thinking about how kids learn, how kids enjoy learning. It's typically not sitting in a desk doing a worksheet. It's typically not engaging in teaching, what we think of as teaching as in older grades. With little ones, you can't stand in front of them and talk for a very long time. One, because they're 3 and 4 and their attention spans are like 2 seconds long, but also they're not going to retain the information. We tend to, in preschool, work very much in the hands-on, multisensory realm. We sit down in the block area with our kids and we build with them and we teach them language, measurement, math language, bigger, little, small. Let's measure this with a tape measure. Those types of natural interactions that you don't necessarily get by standing in front of them or having them do a worksheet. We call all of this developmentally appropriate practices, DAP. It's not just things that we want our room to look cute or we want to have all kinds of fun materials. All of those things have a purpose and they have a reason behind them. And any preschool teacher, I will venture to say any preschool teacher would be able to show you a box of math manipulatives, like those little counting bears, and give you 17 different ways and different things you're learning from the standards, from early childhood standards, which we have. I'm not sure I mentioned that in this presentation. That might be something that we can add to the SharePoint resources is a copy of the newly revised early childhood standards, which show us what we need to be teaching kids at this age. That math manipulative activity can get you progress monitoring for your IEP in probably 3 or 4 different ways. That math manipulative teddy bear counting bears activity can engage in all types of developmental learning as far as touching, hearing, smelling, seeing, hopefully not tasting. You have a yuck bucket for the tasting. 3 and 4-year-olds put things in their mouth all the time. And so you have to have the yuck bucket where things would go. But we have that type of mentality as preschool teachers to know what can take an activity and turn it into an educational opportunity. DAP revolves around the individual child and their unique developmental context. That is something, again, I think is something all teachers do across the board is really try and hone in on what each child needs. But in early childhood, it looks a lot different because we are adaptive in ways that K-12 may not be allowed to be, as far as with classrooms, with seating, with materials, with work. You walk into a 3rd grade classroom, typically everyone's sitting in a desk, in a chair. You may have the odd kid who has an OT need, who has a stool or a squishy chair or things like that. But typically everyone kind of looks the same. I think that's changing a little bit in our worlds as we're kind of understanding more about kids' individual needs, not just in special education, but in regular education as well. But early childhood's kind of always done that. We've always kind of made the environment meet the child, not the child meet the environment. Learning at their own pace is really important. Like we have, like I said, we have standards. We have curriculum that we use. There's not a state-based curriculum, but every program has to have an early childhood curriculum, and we use those pacing guides and we use those, stay on this kind of track to get where we're going. But we also will and have the ability to step outside of that. We want people to step outside of that and really have those children drive the learning in that classroom. There's things that kids can think of that they want to learn about. Dinosaurs, huge in preschool. Fairy tales, nursery rhymes, huge in preschool. And you think, what can you learn from a nursery rhyme? You can learn iambic pentameter. You can learn rhyming words. You can talk about phonetic spellings. You can talk about fantasy and writing, thinking about creative writing. You can learn about math, the three little pigs, right? So those are different ways that we can bring those types of topics to an early childhood world. There is a group, you may or may not have heard about them. They are the National Association for the Education of Young Children, NACCE. NACCE is a national group that supports early childhood. They support early childhood from child cares, private homes, parents, Head Starts, state-funded preschools, 619 preschools, early childhood, special education, all of those. NACCE supports everyone. And they put out a position statement, which I think Bill here has put in the chat for us. Oh, and Becca's put the standards in there too. Thank you so much. This is one thing that they keep in mind when you think about development appropriate practices. You think about how they're learning, what is known about the child as an individual, and what is known about their social and cultural context. DAP is required by preschool regulation. It's in our regulation that you have to have a developmentally appropriate program. We line out the different centers that we want that your children should have access to, balances of quiet and loud activities, and child-directed activities. Dittos, workbooks, test sheets, all of that forbidden by regulation. And that is something we have seen this year in consolidated monitoring. We've seen more of that, more worksheets, more sit-down work, more morning work. They come in off the bus and they sit down at a desk and they have to write their name and they're 3 and have no idea what to do with the pencil. Those are things that we are hoping to. We know that COVID kind of played a role in that, where kids had to be separated. You had to give them something to do that was separate, and that was a really hard time. And you were sending home worksheets because you had to send something home, and you send home a jar of Play-Doh and some counting bears. The parents aren't going to know necessarily what to do with that. Even if you provide instructions, that's really hard for our parents sometimes to do. So we're seeing a lot more of that, and that's something that we're trying to combat. One, again, worksheets don't mean anything to 3 and 4-year-olds. It's a piece of paper. And then thinking about their hands are not physically able to write yet when you're 3 and 4. Now, you may have a kid on the off chance that is ready, and that's fine. But the x-rays of children's hands from a 4-year-old to a 9-year-old are completely different. The bones have not grown together yet. So it makes it much harder for them to do. And if you're forcing them to do it, they're learning bad habits and their hands are not going to be as strong when they move forward, and their handwriting is most likely not going to be as good. I have an example of that in my house. My oldest son kind of was more developmental with his writing. My youngest son was pushed to write at an early age, and his handwriting is terrible because his hands aren't strong. So we're having to go backwards with him to work on hand strength. So that's something that I have experience in my own house. All right, so that's development appropriate practice soapbox, and then we'll talk quickly about data. I know I have not a whole lot of time left. I told you I could talk about this stuff for days and days and days, but without data, all we have is an opinion. I love data. Data is my favorite thing. So we'll buzz through some of this. Developmental screening is required in preschool programs. So you know when a child goes into kindergarten, they have their Brigance screener done. But so when they go into preschool programs, we have a developmental screener that goes through all of the developmental levels: cognition, fine motor, gross motor, speech and artic, some social emotional questions, things like that we talk with our families about to see kind of get an idea of where that child's development at. Is it appropriate for their age? Are they a little bit behind? Do they need a little bit more support? Is it a situation where that screening can be used as part of the special education referral? We see a lot of our screenings with language and artic being used for that special education referral. If a child can't say, say certain sounds at certain ages, they could be pushed forward for a special education referral. We also use that information for kids that might be more advanced and might need a little bit more pushing in the curriculum. As our curriculum and our plans are always individualized to the child, we can do that for certain children who may need a little bit more. Infinite Campus, every child is enrolled in Infinite Campus, just like our K-12 partners. All of our schools are in there. All of our preschool programs are in Infinite Campus. Each child has a preschool tab in preschool, and that is where the funding comes from. So we have a whole other presentation on that, but that's where your money comes from. So you want to make sure that that tab is correct. Just real quickly, Infinite Campus, we're required to put in extreme behavior incidents for our preschool students. This is not daily misbehavior because 3 and 4-year-olds misbehave all the time, right? They're learning how to go to school. They're learning how to follow rules. They're learning how to listen to strangers telling them what to do. This is more of the extreme behaviors that we talked about a little bit earlier. Some of those social emotional things that are occurring now that we maybe not have seen so much of in the past. Any type of restraint that has to happen. Yes, had to restrain 3 and 4-year-olds. Anything like that happens needs to be documented and to create a record, not to create a record on that child, but to provide data collection to say, okay, we've tried everything to help this student. We need to figure something out, whether that's an ARC meeting, an ARC meeting, or if that's a bringing in a counselor, you're bringing mental health services. There has to be some way to support that child and family. Becca?
One thing that I was surprised about when it comes to restraint, can you just give us a quick definition of what it might look like to restrain a 3 or 4-year-old? Because it's not
Sure.
exactly what you would think.
It's not. Well, it can be. It can be what you would think. You're thinking of we don't do the basket seat anymore, but they do the prone restraint on older kids. But it also is you're sitting in circle time and little Johnny is wiggly. Little Johnny will not sit still. Little Johnny keeps bugging his friends. So your assistant puts him in her lap and is holding him and loving him. And he starts to wiggle away and she throws her leg over top his body. She has restrained him. She has restrained his movement. He cannot physically move on his own. He cannot get out of that. That is considered a physical restraint. And that should be documented. There's no need for our assistant or our teacher to throw that leg over little Johnny's lap. There are other ways to help him where he's still able to keep his mobility. Those are things that we really try and hone in on early childhood because we have little kids. They're tiny. They're itty bitty guys, right? And it's easy to pick them up and move them when we've got to move them somewhere. But that can be considered a restraint because you're restricting their movement and their mobility. So you have to be really careful with what we do. Again, these would be extreme behaviors that we would need to be documented, things that are impairing the child's ability to learn, or if they're causing damage to the property themselves or others. Having to make sure that we have those things. So if a preschooler tosses a classroom, and it happens, busts a shelf, and you don't record it, but that 4th grader in that same building does the exact same thing on that exact same day, you're going to document that one, right? So think about that with the 4-year-old and the 4th grader. If they're doing the exact same behavior, we have to make sure we're documenting it correctly. And that because we want to get support for these kids. This is not about naming them a bad kid or labeling them a problem. It's about getting the support and help that they need. Behavior is communication. Yes, thank you, Kim. It's something that we have to make sure we are addressing. There is a question. Oh, private school, homeschool. Yes, I will address that real quickly because it kind of goes into our next talk about indicators. Real quick, preschool data standards. So there are data standards for just about everything in education, not just preschool. Everything enrollment, everything Infinite Campus, special education, regular education, they have a data standard. If it's an Infinite Campus, it has a data standard. On this link here is the Kentucky Student Information System, CASIS. Tons of information there. If you have something, question about Infinite Campus, that's a great place to go to start out at. So I'll answer the question. So preschool and homeschool students in Kentucky, private school, preschool, private school, homeschool, preschool, are not provided the same protections through IDEA as a private school kindergartner would be. In the IDEA and in Kentucky regulations, the preschool program has to meet the definition of an elementary school, and Kentucky preschools do not meet that definition. So if a kid comes in, gets screened, is eligible for speech, mom says, well, we want him to go to the private school and we want you to serve him there, that's not a choice. You can say, I'm sorry, you may come to our program, accept our IEP, not a private school plan, but an IEP, an individualized education program, and receive services here. That's how you would be, that's what you would offer as FAPE, as a free appropriate public education for that child. They would not be offered services in the private school. The school district may choose to have, we call it outpatient type therapy, where those private school or homeschool kids come in every Tuesday and every Thursday for their hour of speech or whatever their IEP dictates, but they don't have to. The preschool program only has to offer the full preschool program, being special education program in their building to meet the requirements for IDEA. Does that answer your question, Ashley?
Yes, I think so. So that student, if the school district chose to provide services to a student that was in preschool, would that student count toward? They wouldn't count toward like the 20 or anything like that.
No, they would not count towards the enrollment. They would not
Okay.
you would not receive state funding. That child would be counted in the IDA funding, but they would not receive state funding for that child.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. So I have very little time, but that's okay. I'm going to keep moving. Indicators 6, 7, and 12. This is kind of the big stuff for doses: participation in regular education classroom, preschool outcomes, and transition. So indicator 6 is least restrictive environment. So that's where you put your kiddos for special education purposes. Kentucky is in the top 5, I believe now, of states in the nation for this indicator. We do very well because Kentucky's preschool program was designed, and always has been designed, is to be an early childhood regular environment. Everyone gets to come together. We have kids in our programs that have disability, and with that, we are fully inclusive. We are designed to have that regular early childhood program for all of our kiddos. The majority of our kids spend their day, get their special education and related services in that regular early childhood program. We have a few out there that do meet the definition of a special education program or a special education class. Those are few and far between, and they are highly specialized. You're thinking about Lexington Hearing and Speech Clinic, thinking about Kentucky School for the Deaf. You think about those types of programs for children with autism. That may be a specific program that child needs. But we are 75%, I believe, of our kids receive their services regular ed. Again, that puts us top 5 in the nation. Preschool is set up much differently in other places in the country. We are set up as a regular education program where students with disabilities are included. A lot of programs in the country have a district, local, or state-run preschool program for typical quote kids, and then they have a special education or 619 program. So all of their special education students are served separately. They're served in self-contained classrooms. They're served in separate spaces. They are not included. That's not something Kentucky does. It's mindful. You need to be mindful of that when you're placing kids in classrooms, thinking about the different levels of disability that teacher may have to deal with, like we talked about earlier. But overall and in general, Kentucky is great with this indicator. We are a model program that other states call me and call us and ask to learn about how we do this, how we include all of our kids. Part of the ability to do that is that IECE degree, that dual certification that we have. We're able to serve both populations of students. Outcome 7, or indicator 7, is preschool outcomes. We use the child outcome summary. It's a new system that we have here for data collecting. We look at the outcomes from entry into preschool. These would be specific to students with disabilities. So students with disabilities, when they enter preschool and get that first IEP, to when they exit preschool. So sometimes we're getting information from a 3-year-old to a 4-year-old, how they grow over those years in positive social skills, acquisition and use of knowledge, and appropriate behaviors to meet needs. We look at those 3 areas and kind of see how our kids are improving. This is our data to say, specifically with our children with disabilities, to say that preschool is doing its job. This would be our quote high stakes testing, right? It's not testing in any way, but if you want to compare it to something, that's what we can kind of compare it to. You can kind of compare it to the Brigance as well if you wanted to. But the Brigance is a screener, and this is more assessment based. Again, we just changed systems here, so we're having some growing pains with that, but it's looking good so far. But your preschool, the preschool coordinator in your district where you work, should know about this information for you as well. And then indicator 12 is a transition from C to B. So Part C services in Kentucky are called KEIS, KEYS, Kentucky Early Intervention Services, formerly First Steps. I'm having a real hard time not calling it First Steps. I used to be a First Steps provider as well back in the day. So this falls under general supervision for Part B. Children who are found eligible for Part B coming from Part C. Not every student who gets First Steps or KEYS services is eligible for Part B services. If a kid is receiving services in First Steps, KEYS, Part C, whatever you want to call it, if they're receiving those early intervention services, they are not automatically eligible to come to preschool. They have to meet eligibility guidelines for Part B, which they may not. It depends on the services they've received. It depends on what they've gotten and how they've progressed. I mean, I think probably the majority are, but they're not automatically or categorically eligible. That's something to remember. OSEP expects 100% compliance when it comes to this indicator. Every child should have that IEP implemented by their 3rd birthday. That does not always happen because of communication issues with districts and First Steps, the KEYS program. It's something that we are working very hard to combat sometimes. Yes, Kim.
Remind me, and I think I know the answer to this, but just remind me, what is the number of days before they turn 3 that if we get notification, like if it's within 30 days of their 3rd birthday, which this happened to me.
Yes, it does.
I got a June notification and they've turned 3 in July. Is it 90 days that's exempt?
So how this works, we are notified of Polygolf, who will be with you guys, I believe, next session. We'll be going over some of this information more in depth as well. But yes, so 2 years, 3 months. At that point, a child is in the transition window. So once they hit 2 years, 3 months, that's 90 days before they turn the 2 years, 3 months. That's 9 months. It's 9 months before they turn 3. So within that window, students should be starting that transition process to the Part C program. What Kim is talking about are students who do not begin that process until late. There's a couple different caveats. The one I think you're thinking of, Kim, is if a student is referred to Part C less than 45 days before their 3rd birthday, they do not count as a transition because they've not received a First Steps, quote, Part C program.
Yes, 45 days.
Yes, 45 days. They've not received
this one was
that.
Like 30 days, I think.
Yeah, and
yeah.
It's one of those things that
like June 23rd and they turned 3 July 19th.
Yes, there's sometimes
typically we do all of our summer ones in May.
Yeah.
So I was like, I I don't have anybody here to do this. So
Right.
45 days. That's
45 days.
I just didn't have it in front of me. So I was like, what was it? 90? What was that number?
Yes. So, and that's a child referred to Part C. Now, if a kid has been getting Part C services since they turned 1 and you don't get that notification that they're turning 3 until the week before, as a school district, you are still on the hook for that kid to have them transition. You have to move fast and furious, which is not the best thing for the kid, family, or the school district, but that is, you are still under that requirement to have that child's IEP
So say
implemented
that
by
again.
their
So if
birthday.
a child has been receiving services since they were like 1.5,
Yeah, I mean, if they've
and then I
received a
don't get
service, yeah,
notification until 2 weeks before they turn 3, I would still be on the hook for that, and that could
You would.
possibly impact indicator 12.
it could. If you don't meet that deadline, it would impact indicator 12. It is not fair in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
And
because
we understand that.
I don't have school psychs.
Yeah.
I don't during the summer.
Yep. And that is something that communication with First Steps is really important. That communication with Keys is really important to have that put together for
I'm usually
each district.
that hasn't happened yet. This kid just started. That was the
Yeah.
one that.
It does happen. It does happen.
It
and can make
does. It
things
hasn't
really
happened to me
hard.
yet, thank God. But
Yeah. Mike.
Yeah, when that happened to me, I would contract with my school psychs and just see, hey, I'd pay them an evaluation fee to come in during the summer, and sometimes I would call if I couldn't pull that off, I'd call a neighboring dose and see if they had a school psych that was willing to do some contract work. So
Yeah, we definitely don't want that to
That's
be the norm.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was great advice.
Yes. Yes. Mike's full of great advice. It's true. All right. Oh, it's been a lot. I talked a lot. And for some of you, this may have been brand new information. For others, it's not. Sometimes a mix in between. One place you can go to get more information are our regional training centers. So when you become a DOS, or if you already are a DOS or a coordinator, you have the special education regional technical assistance centers, the CERTACs. We also have regional training centers for early childhood. There's 5 of those. And here's the little map. This one is a little bit different if you're in Clinton County, or if anybody's in Clinton County. They are now with Simpson, and Bergen Independent is now with Anderson. Got to update the map a little bit, but they're there for your help and support. These folks have assistive technology libraries you can borrow from. They've got materials out the roof for you guys to have and to borrow. They have trainings on their websites, a lot of individual modes and models of trainings, and things that people can really get in depth into some certain topics. If you have teachers that need training, send them there. They're great. If you need contact with them, anyone on the leads group can get you connected. That's not something you have to wait to do either. If you're currently in a school district and you're working with little ones and you need some support, give them a call. Or if you know someone that needs some support, give them a call. They're there to help and to support. There's our contact information. This is me, Andrea, here, and Becca there. You guys know us. These are some consultants in our branch. Then we have our learning unit, which is led by Dr. Thomas Williams. We have several folks there that work with us. And then I'm done. Kids, these are my boys. These are my 2 kids. They're the reason we lose it and the reason we hold it together. As you work through your professional and your personal lives, mostly your professional here, I suppose. It's about our kids. It's about the outcomes for our kiddos. I say a lot. Kim's heard me say it a lot. If you're doing what's right for a kid and family, it's really hard to be wrong. That kid and family need support and need help, and that's why we all have jobs. So yes, we must be compliant. Yes, we must be under regulation, but holding it together for those kids is really important. I appreciate the work that you do and the work that you will do. And I look forward to collaborating with you all again in the future sometime soon. And I appreciate your attendance and your attention today to this, what I think is the most important thing in the world.
I love that picture, Andrea. Thanks for sharing
Well,
that.
I'm gonna tell on them just a smidge. They're not actually. We do meditate in my house. We meditate in my house. I'm a little bit of a hippie. We do this, but this is actually a celebration for Soccer Goal by Erling Haaland, who plays in Europe. that they
Woohoo.
both love. And that's his celebration when he scores a goal and he sits down and he meditates. So that's what they're doing. They're not